Well, we made it. It's the end of 2021, and we're in the holiday season. It's been quite a year, and here at Stay the Water, we've done our very best to bring you movers and shakers and policymakers to you to discuss issues important to the community. This is the Best of Stay the Water show. Stay tuned as we hear some of our best interviews and shows of the year. Welcome back. It's Stay the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Claville. I want to wish everyone a happy and merry holiday season. I hope everyone had a phenomenal Christmas on yesterday. I know that we did. Not only that, but I hope you guys are going to have a phenomenal new year. We have been tremendously blessed here in 2021. We've got our producer here, Marvin Folks, also known as DJ Scandalous.
How you doing, sir? It's been a great year for State of the Water.
Absolutely. You know, we've been tremendously blessed to do what we do here on WNSB, the new sound of Hot 91, the Soul of VA, on the campus of the Norfolk State University, home of the Spartan Nations, under leadership of our phenomenal president, Dr. J, and our phenomenal administration, faculty, students, staff, and alumni, and all of our supporters. It's been one heck of a year.
It sure has. I mean, from the top all the way to now, a lot of great things. We took place in a lot of events. State of the Water has been out there in the community. We've been bringing you a lot of great information right here on WNSB Hot 91. So stay tuned. We have a lot of new events and a lot of great information we're going to provide for you this new year.
Absolutely. And Marvin, you hit the nail right on the head. We have been covering a lot of major issues in the community, out in the community with our forums that we've had. Also participating in the community with various giveaways and partners that we've had with the radio station. And not only that, but also phenomenal guests and information that we've been able to give to the surrounding community, our campus community, alumni community, and all those across the country. You know, we've had listeners that call in all the way from Florida to Texas to Louisiana, all across the state of Virginia. I mean, so it shows that Stay the Water has been growing. The radio station has been growing. The university has been growing. And guess what? It's not going to stop there.
It's not. We're making a huge impact. And Dr. Claville, you've done such a phenomenal job. I mean, you've helped me tremendously. I was able to graduate this year with my master's degree in cybersecurity. And I mean, the mentorship I got from Norfolk State University and Dr. Claville, phenomenal. And just being here, being able to be a producer and run the boards, do the board operations, and meet all the phenomenal guests that we have, like Delegate Cliff Hayes and many others, being able to answer the phone for the governor when he called in. So just a phenomenal, great job that we're doing right here on State of the Water at Hot 91.
Absolutely. And you know what? Again, this is only the beginning. But for this show, I think what we wanted to do was give all of our listeners just a little reminder of some of the great interviews and shows that we've had in the past. So this is our best of Stay the Water, end of the year, 2021. And we want all of you to tune in and listen to some of the best interviews that we think, now it's not all of them, but that we think were informative, engaging, and yes, part of what we do here. Bring movers and shakers and policymakers to you to discuss issues important to the community. After years of conspiracy theories, also giving a bully pulpit and a bullhorn to white supremacists, it's finally happened. Finally, America can see itself in the mirror. The siege and assault upon our capital and upon our democracy was telling. The question now is, where will we go from here? This is Stay the Water, and I'm your host, award-winning Dr. Eric Claville. And we're going to talk about the siege upon our capital and also the assault on our democracy. Where do we go from here? January 6th will live in infamy. But also, we have with us as our special guest, Delegate-elect Candy King, an NSU alum who's representing the House District 2. Come back and join us in just a moment. Welcome back. You're listening to State of the Water, and I'm your host, Dr. Eric Claville. Ladies and gentlemen, January 6th will live in infamy in our nation and in the world. It was truly a sad day, not just for our nation, not just for our democracy, but for the world itself. The United States stands as a beacon of light to the world for all that is good, all that is great in humanity. But on January 6th, we had fellow citizens who became a violent mob that rushed our nation's capital and desecrated that which was sacred. We want to hear your thoughts about it. And I want you to call in the second hour, and we want to really hear what you feel about it. And keep in mind that this is a black eye upon our nation. But the question is, where do we go from here? What feelings were you having when you saw individuals rushing the Capitol? What feelings were you having when you saw individuals posting on social media that this is an uprising? These are the things that are going to happen. What feelings do you have when our elected officials were responding to this? 757-823-9110, 757-823-9110. We want to hear from you in the second half hour of our show. But right now, we have our special guest. I want to bring to you NSU alum and very own Delegate-elect Candy King, who's just been elected to the 2nd House District here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Delegate-elect King, how are you today?
Hi, how are you? I'm wonderful. Thank you so much for inviting me on the show. I love the format, and, while this has been a time of celebration for my family, it's also been a very reflective time as we watch the tragedy that unfolded at the Capitol this week. So thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of the show.
Delegate-elect King, we thank you so much for being such a phenomenal alum and supporter of the university. You wear your Spartan pride everywhere you go. Anybody that knows you knows that you speak and you wear an NSU on your chest, on your sleeve, and everything that is all that's good about NSU. You are a part of that. We want to know now this House seat. This was a special election. It was left open by Jennifer Carroll Foy, who's running for governor. And what led you to actually say, hey, I'm going to throw my hat in this race. I know I have a family. I know I have things going on, but I'm going to throw my hat in this race to represent this district. What went on in that journey for you to actually make that decision?
Yes, and I'm laughing because I think if you cut me, I think I would bleed green and gold. Like, I cannot hide my Spartan pride, as we used to say. And the reason for that is because Norfolk State University changed my life. It changed the life of my family. My nephew, Darren Williams, is a December 2020 graduate of Norfolk State University. So for me to be a first-generation college student, it showed other young people in my family that this was possible to get an education, to change our lives. So I will forever sing the praises of this beautiful place by Virginia's Golden Shores that has changed my life. But to answer the question, it took a lot of, and I say a lot, but really this decision was made between 11 o'clock and 6 o'clock the next day, and it was a lot of prayer and conversation with my husband because I didn't expect Delegate Carroll Foy, who has represented this area tremendously and who has left very big shoes for me to fill.
Yes.
I didn't expect this, so it was very unexpected, but I thought about my time as a little girl growing up in Lincoln Park, in the projects in Portsmouth, Virginia, and so many people who illuminated for me that college was an option.
Wow.
I thought about Senator Louise Lucas, who, has known me since I was a young woman, and the sacrifices that people like her have made. And I wanted to give that back to the community that is home for me now, which is Stafford and Prince William counties
Yes.
In Northern Virginia. So it was really out of a heart for service and knowing that the time was ripe and that my community was such a short turnaround that my community could use the skills that I gained at Norfolk State and in the General Assembly.
Yes, yes. You know, you mentioned those that influence your journey, and I think that a lot of us don't realize in the moment the impact that people that pour into us have on the future that we would lead. And you talked about Senator Louise Lucas. Who at NSU can you think of, professor, administrator, colleague, that you can say at that time they were pouring into me, but I could see now exactly the reason why?
Oh, my goodness. There are so many people to name, and I feel that I will forget someone and they will never let me live it down, but I would definitely have to say the entire political science department. That department challenged me. Woot woot! Shout out to poli-sci. The folks in that department challenged me, Dr. Pretlow and Dr. Hubbard, and they really challenged me to be a thinker and to think strategically and critically. And they also gave me a new lens, a different lens on what it means to be Black in the world, not just in the United States. I think that global perspective really changed my life in terms of seeing the diversity of Black folks and our history and really learning our history and the history of us in politics and government and the things we created and built. So definitely the poli-sci department. Dr. Davenport in the English department, Dr. Wanda Brockington, and, most of all, there were two people, Dr. Marie V. McDemin, our former president, and Carla Johnson, who was her chief of staff and government relations liaison. I was a young girl with a lot to say, with a big mouth and ideas. And, I said, Dr. McDemin, we should be doing blah, 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 blah. And she said, come to my office. And she introduced me to Carla, and I shared my ideas with them. And they gave me a chance. They opened doors for me to meet Senator Yvonne Miller, whose office I interned in, whose perspective on what it means to serve people in elected life, her approach really is what shaped what I hope to bring to the legislature. So Dr. Robin Marable, as I sit here and I think about people outside of my department who just really poured into me, Tanya Burton, everyone in the president's office, who just really poured into a young girl who they saw potential in. And Norfolk State is such a unique place that even members of our Board of Visitors, and people who I had the opportunity to work with and learn from, they've just always seen the future. They saw the future in me. They saw potential, and they put their money where their mouth was. So it's just too many people to name.
You know what? Basically, you've just proved the adage, it takes a village. And for us to, as we walk through this life, and I know we're in a hard time in our society, but just the kind word, just the word of encouragement, you don't know what that's going to do for that person moving forward. And you're a perfect example of that. You mentioned how the professors exposed you to, and the curriculum and just your time here in SU, exposed you to the beautiful world of Blackness. And coming from where you come from in Portsmouth and in the projects there and where you are now, can you talk about the last year's Black Lives Matter movement and how that affected you, and did that help to galvanize you in your mission today going into the legislature?
Absolutely. So it personally, as a mother, as a Black woman, watching the movement was heartbreaking because of the necessity of it. But it was also inspiring to see young people pushing for change and gaining some wins that people had fought for politely for years, right? And they were able to take it to the street, so to speak, and demand changes. And we're still seeing seeing change because of that. And so it impacted me personally. I mentor students here in Northern Virginia, and many of my students were organizers of the rallies here, and they were challenging our policies here. They were asking people to shine a light on the inequities here, because sometimes in our communities here in Northern Virginia, we see jobs and we see that there's so much plenty, but there's so much need.
Yes.
There are so many people who still struggle. There are so many working families who can't afford housing. So I was deeply inspired watching the movement, but I'm also a mother, and I'll just tell you a quick little story. Sure. You know, I have a 8-year-old, I have a 10-year-old, and I have a 17-year-old. My 17-year-old is on the autism spectrum, and she really, she is high functioning, but she struggles with communication. So she's more aware of what was happening with the Black Lives Matter movement. But my younger children were not, because we intentionally, you know, don't watch the news with them. You know, we don't want to traumatize them. And my 10-year-old came to me with tears in her eyes, and she said, Mommy, who is George Floyd? And why did they treat him that way? Because someone on one of her video games was creating a Black Lives Matter group, and these kids were creating advocacy in the middle of a game. Wow. So Mr. Floyd's death stopped kids playing, I think it was Roblox or something, and they were creating murals in the game to honor him. And I shed tears with my daughter, and I explained to her what happened. And she said, why do we still have to go through this? And that's something that fuels me. I'm always going to be fighting for those who feel that they don't have a voice. And sometimes when we see things like what happened over the summer, and just in the history of this country, period, we can feel voiceless, but we can't let that feeling keep us paralyzed. We have to move forward. I've had people say to me, are you afraid with everything that's happening at the Capitol and with people, threatening public officials? Are you afraid? And I tell them, I can't live in a space of fear. That's right. Because my people have too much to lose. So we have to keep pressing forward. We can't let these people fearmonger us into being paralyzed. I know that was more than you probably asked for.
Oh, no, look. I mean, this is what State of Word is about. It's about giving the platform and the microphone to you, the community, to really talk about what's in your heart, because we want to reach where, the mainstream media and others really don't go. We want to hear from you. So you gave us exactly what we were looking for. And I was going to say, keep going. But I do have another question. One thing that Black Lives Matter did, it really brought to the forefront what Americans have been going through for years, but people didn't believe us. Right. The police harassment, I think about the black man in the park in New York who was basically being framed for a crime that they committed right before our eyes. I think about, Breonna Taylor. I think about all the things that took place. It seemed like in every corner of our nation. And people were seeing this, and we had a reckoning. But transpose that now and compare it to what happened this week, where you have thousands and thousands and thousands of people that came from around the country to protest and really cause confusion and death and violence on a conspiracy, something that isn't true. Where do you think our society, right now it seems like we're in the right corner and the left corner, and there's nobody in the middle. Where do you think society is now, and what do you think is going to take to bring us back together?
So I disagree with the left corner and the right corner. I think most of us have more in common than we realize. It is just these extremists who are the loudest. And it is the extremists who are showing up and desecrating the nation's capital. Yes. And harming, such a beautiful place. Not only is the Capitol a beautiful place, but it's full of some of the hardest working people. That's right. A lot of them Black people who clean, who organize, who direct the activities and functioning of the Capitol, who secure and protect it. My heart was with those Black officers who had to endure and do their job and face the visual representation of racism and extremism and terrorism. And, so I think that there are more of us who believe that this country should be moving forward and that we need to face our past. I've heard so many people say this is not who we are. This is who we have been.
That's right.
We forget about the complicity of law enforcement in the church bombings in Alabama that killed 4 little girls.
That's right.
We forget about, police and ambulance not coming to our communities. So I think that how we move forward is to shine a light. I was excited to see companies like Twitter and Facebook finally take action and remove the platform of those who incite violence, those who have, spoken dog whistle to these people to come and do what they did, which was a very disgusting thing. There's no way around it. And, for me, it broke my heart towards the end of the day to see those people just walk away.
Yeah.
And, that part was very troubling to me, that they just would walk away. And so I think we have to continue to shine light. We have to hold these companies accountable for providing the platform for these people because, you can't, I learned this at Norfolk State during one of those few pre-law classes. You can't run into a theater and yell fire.
That's right.
And people get trampled, right? But you can you have people who get on Twitter and dog whistle and activate these people to come out and cause harm to others. And that's not right. I think the path forward is accountability and light. Shine a light on these people and hold them accountable for their actions.
This is Stay in the Water, and I'm your host, award-winning Dr. Eric Claville. Today we have on the show Delegate-elect Candy King, NSU alum, and the newly elected delegate for the second house here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Here, we're talking about the siege on the Capitol and the assault on democracy, and you mentioned history, and everyone that listens to the show knows that I'm a student of history, and my specialty is legal history, and when you talk about, us, this is who we've been, and the bombing that we had, people forget about the lynchings that we endured as African Americans, but it wasn't brought to the forefront until, of course, the NAACP started posting another black man lynched today. People forget about the Emmett Till, right, where they didn't realize that the evil, the amount of evil that our fellow Americans can cast upon us until the mother courageously opened up the casket. There are so many other things that we just ignore and put our heads in the sand about, but we continue to gloss over it, and we give these individuals a pass. What do you think will be the solution here? How do we handle and hold these individuals accountable?
So I think, and I'm not, and I'm sure my husband, who's in law enforcement, is listening, so I won't pretend to play a law enforcement officer, but I will say that with all of the technology that we have, I think that law enforcement should be using that technology to identify every single person who breached the Capitol. That will send a sign. I was happy also to see the leader of the Capitol Police resign. I think that will start a path to accountability. I think that we need to use our technology to find every single person who breached the Capitol and charge them accordingly. I think that will send a message that we are willing to move in the right direction and hold these people accountable. Because for too long in America, we don't have truth and reconciliation.
Yes.
You go to other countries, you go to Germany, you go to South Africa, you go to these places where they are at least honest about their complicity in slavery or in, internment camps and all of these things that have played a role in their history. And I think it will help us with healing if we were to move forward with that as always. We like to say, oh, that's in the past. It's not in the past if I'm still seeing people flying Confederate flags on the highway in Virginia. If I'm seeing people with Confederate flags as they breach the Capitol.
Right.
So we need some truth and reconciliation.
You know, you mentioned that flag, and this is a hot topic. We've got callers calling in now, and we're going to take your calls in the second half hour. We want to spend this time with our very own NSU alum, Delegate-elect Candy King. But those of you that have called, those of you that are holding, if you want to call back or continue holding, please do. We're going to take your call in the second half hour of the show because we want to hear from you. But you mentioned that Confederate flag. And many times we gloss over and say, oh, it's just a few people. But if you are in a position of power, influence, and access, like the senators and the congressmen that were on the floors of the houses, continuing to perpetuate this lie, continue to perpetuate falsehoods, continue to perpetuate and give a bullhorn to people that are believing conspiracies, then you are complicit. And you talk about that Confederate flag, and everybody in Virginia knows. When you travel up I-64 and you get ready to go toward Richmond or you go toward D.C., you got to come to that fork. And at that fork is that Confederate flag flying high and proud. And I think that is a metaphor for where we are today. We're at a fork. We're at a fork in our society. We're at a fork here in the Commonwealth. And I think that a lot of individuals like yourself and others that are serving in the houses, serving in various cities, have spoken up this past summer. And I think we are moving toward that path, but we can't stop. We simply can't stop now. With that being the case, what is your focus? I mean, some persons run for office because they just run, but, you know, I believe that you're purpose driven, and I believe you just didn't throw your hat in just to say I'm going to do it, because you're very active outside of the.
I got a lot going on, right?
Right. It's like, oh, let me put this on my plate. But what is your focus and what is your agenda in the legislature, not just this session, but moving forward?
Sure. And just so you know, we have one of those flags on 95 as well in Northern Virginia between Fredericksburg and Stafford that thankfully VDOT actually just took possession of the land to expand the road and remove the flag. So, I think some people will never understand what it's like for us to explain to our children why people are flying, as my baby used to say, the wrong flag.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
It just continues to baffle me. But, as my focus, and I learned this from Senator Miller, my focus is and will always be community. And right now, working families are hurting. So I will be fighting for paid family and sick leave. I will be fighting for teachers and better pay, as well as better funding for some of the school systems to get the equipment they need to really safely reopen.
Wow.
I think that COVID-19 has decimated communities as well as small businesses, in which, minorities make up a considerable percentage of small businesses here in the Commonwealth. So I'll definitely be looking for ways to support those small businesses as well. But the primary focus for me will be working families. We know family looks different for everyone, whether it's, a grandmother or, taking care of grandchildren,
yes,
or, whatever the case may be. However your family looks, I want to be a voice for working families across the political spectrum because, I am a proud Democrat. And I think that people in Virginia have spoken, and we have spoken consistently with the way we have voted for our president in the last 12 years. We have spoken consistently with our governor, our House, and our Senate that people in Virginia want progress.
That's
and
right.
So I will be a voice for working families and the progress of all Virginians.
Wow. That is so refreshing because, the greatest service that you can give is selfless service. The ability to put somebody else's needs before your own. And based upon your agenda, we believe that that's going to be the case. In our closing moments, we only have a couple of minutes left during this time. What is that one thing that you want to give to the NSU faithful, the Spartan Nation, and the constituents here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, of what you believe is the most important thing that we should focus on and that you'll be working with us on in the coming days.
Sure. Well, I have to say thank you again for having me, and I cannot not shout out my babies, my kids who I mentor here in Northern Virginia, who are students at NSU, Daniela, Samantha, Q, Chris, Estelio, all of my freedom babies. Yay. I love you all. I'm so proud of you, my little Spartan babies. But I will say to everyone that this past week has shown us that elections matter. Elections have consequences. I was extremely proud to be on the ballot the same day as the Honorable Angela Williams Graves in Norfolk. You know, Black Girl Magic was on the ballot, and we were both honored to be elected. But elections have consequences, and we need more people who believe in working families to run for office. Now, don't run against me, but
right, you just got there.
Right, I just got there. Give me a chance. But we need more people to step up at the local level, at the state level, and even beyond. We need more seats at the table, more voices for working people, more diversity. And, you know, when these opportunities come up, get involved. We cannot, this is a moment, it's a watershed moment for us to get involved at all levels of government. That is the only way we will continue to progress and make change.
Welcome back. It's Stay the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Claville. We want to thank you again for joining us here on this very special show, the best of Stay the Water end of the year 2021. It's been a tremendous year. We're tremendously blessed to do what we do, and we come every weekend to do it just for you, our listeners. We wouldn't be here without them. Isn't that right, Mark?
That's exactly right. I mean, the listeners are phenomenal. They call in, they give us their opinions and their inputs about what's going on in the community, and it help us to come up with more topics for the following Sunday so we can be able to provide great information for the 757 and the campus of NSU. Absolutely.
And not only that, but because of what we've gone through in 2021, 2020, this year is even special. Even more special, right? I mean, we, we didn't know as a country, as a state, where we were going to be at this time period. But again, great leadership and the blessings and the grace and mercy of God, we were able to pull through, and not just pull through, but do extraordinary things on this campus. From our leadership of our president, phenomenal president, Dr. J, our administration, faculty, staff, students, supporters, alumni, and all those that love the Spartan Nation. You know, we are here to do great things and greater in 2022. So for this show, we want you to listen to a few more interviews of things that we thought were some of the best that we've done here in 2021 here on Stay the Water. So continue to tune in and listen to these interviews. The story of the Black church, our story, from so many different angles. But today we've got a wonderful, wonderful treat for you. Usually we have one guest to talk about these issues that we bring to you, the community. But today we've got a panel of phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal leaders in our community. And I want to introduce them for you. We got Bishop Courtney Macbeth, who is the senior pastor of Calvary Revival Church in Norfolk, Virginia. Bishop Macbeth, thank you so much for being back on Stay the Water.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me, Dr. Claville.
Wonderful. Look, we've got Dr. Melvin Mariner, senior pastor of Grove Church in Portsmouth, Virginia. Dr. Mariner, thank you so much for joining us here on Stay the Water.
My honor. Thank you for having me.
And again, to the pastors, we want to thank you again because we know Sundays is the busy day to feed your flock. But we know that as pastors, you feed your flock every day. There are many things that come up that happen, and we're going to talk about your work in your church that you're doing, the great work that you're doing here in the Hampton Roads area in just a moment. But also today we've got my sister, Barbara Hamley, who is the host of Another View on WHRV Public Media Radio. Barbara, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing great, Eric. Thank you so much. It is so different to be on this side of the microphone, so I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Now, let me give a little plug here for Barbara when she says on this side of the microphone. When I say she's my sister, I mean that because she gave me my first start in radio. Almost 10 years ago.
Almost 10 years ago. That's right.
We've had so many wonderful times, so many wonderful conversations, and we actually won a national award together for the talk commentary on Another View. So again,
the Claville Report, which we debuted on Another View, and have Eric on as a regular on our broadcast, bringing our audience such perspective on what is happening politically, socioeconomically, and really take a world view of what's going on. So, Eric, thank you, because you are part of our success. We appreciate it.
Well, look, you have my love, your wonderful husband, Maxie, and the crew, Barbara, Lisa over there, and, of course, Victor Bowman. He's no longer there, but, again, wonderful, wonderful operation.
All these Spartans working with me.
That's right. You got all Norfolk State Spartans working for you, making WHRO a success, just like we have here at WNSB. Well, look, I want to get right into it. And, we've been talking about the Black church here on WNSB from various aspects. From not just from a pastor standpoint, but also from a music standpoint, community standpoint. And Barbara, you actually kicked it off on your show, Another View, at the beginning of February. Tell us first about the show that you did, your guests, and what were your thoughts about the documentary itself?
Wow. Well, first of all, the documentary took me through every range of emotion, just like a really awesome church service, because I went from jubilation to sadness to frustration, back to jubilation. It was just wonderful. There's some painful parts of our history. There's some joyous parts of our history, but it is ours. And just to be able to embrace it and have Dr. Gates tell it in such a moving and compelling way was awesome. We did our first show back on February the 4th, and you can find it at anotherviewradio.org. But we had Dr. Antipas Harris with the Potter's House in Dallas. We had Bishop
Kim Brown.
Oh, Brown. Thank you. I'm very good at that. Bishop Kim Brown with the mouth. And we also had Dr. Davis from First Baptist Church Williamsburg, which is the third oldest African American church in the country.
Absolutely.
And it was built by blacks for blacks right here in Williamsburg. And so he was on, and it was a lively conversation. As a matter of fact, I thought that Dr. Davis would be more shy compared to the other two ministers that I had spoken with. And at the end of the show, I really literally had to say, Dr. Davis, you have to stop talking because we're out of time.
Absolutely. Barbara, and Bishop Kim Brown is also a board member here at Norfolk State University. We're so lucky to have him as well. And, you mentioned, a lot of hurtful things, a lot of jubilation, just a litany or the entire circle of emotions. And we felt the same way when we were watching it, my wife and I. It was just so intriguing, kept drawing us in. But from a pastor standpoint, Bishop McBath, what was your take on the documentary, and what were some of the most compelling parts to you?
Well, I think my overall take is, first of all, it's always a blessing when we tell our own story.
Absolutely.
As opposed to letting other people tell our story, because inevitably, when they tell our story, they get it wrong. And so the beauty of it was us telling our own story. I think for me, the most profound piece was that you cannot separate the black church from the black community, which is what I think the church was originally designed to be, not some religious something that we do for 45 minutes to an hour and 15 minutes on Sunday, but it was always intended to be intrinsically tied into the community. And the greatest blessing for me was good, bad, up, down, victory, defeat. But the church was always connected to our community and is to this day still connected.
Absolutely. Dr. Meritor, what was your take on the documentary itself?
To me, it was a very fascinating approach to really demonstrate to us in America. I was hoping that white America was watching as well, but in case not, it was fascinating in the sense that we saw the emergence of strength strength that was then redefined by their worship, strength that was redefined by how they saw each other. So very interesting to see the different dynamics of how they came together and then how they struggled to find identity, gender identity in the church as well. Being enslaved, then coming into the church and then having to establish who's in charge.
Right.
Of course, male-dominant society. The black male took control, but the black woman was powerful just as she is today. And so it was very fascinating how they brought all of these pieces together and just saw the different fragmentations of both the world and even at that moment, the black community and how they saw gender-based and how it related to the gospel. It was a great documentary. It was just a great put-together move of God.
Being a student of history, to me, it was the story that was told from the African-American experience. And like you said, Bishop McBeth, you can't separate the black church from the black community. I say you can't separate from the black experience because it was our foundation. It was our rock. For all the years that we've been here, you can always go to the church, and as we talked about last time, you can go there to lay your burdens down, both spiritual and natural burdens, as you go all throughout, all throughout life. But if there was anything in the documentary, and I know we only had 2 days, I think it was maybe 3 hours each, so you can't tell all of it, right? But if there was anything left out or anything that you wanted to see, what would you add to it as an executive producer? Dr. Meredith, we'll start you first.
What I add to it, it was, of course, you can't get the elephant in this capsule. It is such a tremendous and rich history. I think that was put together well, and I wasn't looking to have all the pieces there. And so, if anything, the history part was good. I wanted to kind of see some comments. Where was the church now? How did the church evolve, and what has the church evolved into? Looking at our historical strength, looking at how we were able to overcome some things because of our worship experience, because of the theology that became a liberating theology. So, really, where has the past taken us today? And maybe that's another documentary coming up. But to me, I can't ask for anything more than what Henry Louis Gates gave us, because now the work must now continue with us to learn more about it.
Absolutely. Bishop McBath.
I think for me, the one thing, and there's just not enough time to tell every detail of the story.
Absolutely.
But you see the fragmentation of Methodists, of Episcopals, Baptists, Pentecostals, and you see that we were not a monolithic religious community, that we had different perspectives. But what I would have added was to show how connected they all were, and how the birth of the African American church through the AME church was the thing that helped the Baptists get started. And it was a Baptist pastor that started the Pentecostal movement, William J. Seymour. And so if you look at our history, we have a wonderful tapestry of how all of our different faith perspectives have all blended together to produce a very beautiful black church.
Absolutely. Barbara.
The only thing that I would have added, and possibly because I'm connected with the church, but I really would have loved to have heard the history of First Baptist Williamsburg, because I just think, this is a group of slaves who were singing in a grove in a bunch of trees in the Williamsburg area, and a gentleman heard the singing and the praising, and he offered his barn to them, and that's how they started the church. And they built it, and its existence today, the bell that was in the church was rung at the African American Museum in Washington, D.C. The history is just so rich. But again, it's like you said, you can't cover everything. And Henry Louis Gates really focused on Georgia and the more southern states in terms of telling the story. So maybe perhaps when he does part 2, we can get our history right here in Hampton Roads. Because, it is amazing to me from what I learned about Fort Monroe,
Yes.
Now with what's going on in Williamsburg because they're actually doing an archaeological dig where they found the original church that was built, and they're doing that dig now. There is so much history, so much of our history right here in Virginia, and it was suppressed and it was put down, and it's time for that history to be told and to be celebrated. So, but the documentary itself was incredible. I'm curious for the pastors, Eric, to know what do you all think about the fact that Henry Louis Gates did not shy away from some of the issues that we have in church also? And I tell you, the one thing that sticks out in my mind when Sylvester was talking about how the church, his quote was, "Some of the people who turned me out were the ones who turned me out," which means because he was gay, he was rejected by the church. And they did not shy away from some of the issues that we are grappling with in the Black church today. And so I'm wondering what you thought about the fact that he brought the good, but he also said, hey, look, let's take a serious look at ourselves in all aspects. Courtney McBath, we'll start with you.
Well, I think by doing that, he really reflects the nature of even Scripture. Because when we read Scripture, God doesn't leave out the ugly either. There are some things that happen in the life of David or in the life of Abraham. There are things that happen in the life of Paul. And those things are not all nice things. There's some ugly things. And I think a part of what creates what I call redemptive history is that God even redeems the evil or what could appear to be ugly and can make it good. So I was blessed that he didn't try to sugarcoat it and make it look like we always agreed or we were always right or we always did it the way it should have been done. I appreciated the perspective of our humanity because I think that's what makes the church wonderful is that we're all so imperfect, but yet we're serving a perfect God. Absolutely.
And I also love Melvin, Pastor Marion, pardon me, since I know you, I feel comfortable calling you that.
Melvin is fine.
Okay. But the whole idea of how we come together despite our differences, because as one of you said before, the Black community is not a monolith. People want to think all the time, what does the Black community think? It's the same thing with the Black church. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I think that for me, transparency is empowerment. Vulnerability provides a level of exposure and possible engagement and empowerment. And as I quote James Cone says this, if we cannot recognize the truth, then it cannot liberate us from the untruth. And so while all of us must recognize we don't want to talk about it, but I've learned that my weaknesses provide me an opportunity for growth. And if I were to shun away from my weaknesses or my flaws or my imperfections, then I would cease to grow or even cease to be. And so what Henry Louis Gates does, he provides an honest picture of the struggles and the power of the church. And just because we're powerful, it doesn't mean that we don't have anything to apologize for, anything to ask forgiveness for. Those who turned me out, that was a strong statement. And my wife Shelley and I looked at one another, and because we recognize the church has been unfair and to a lot of people. But again, you cannot negate the strength, nor can you negate the fragmentations that we have caused as well. So I think that it's a bittersweet moment, and it is called life.
You're listening to Stay with the Water here on WNSB Blazing Hot 91. For the entire month of February, WNSB has partnered with PBS, WHRO Public Media, in conjunction with the Corporation for Public Broadcasting to offer programming for the debut of the documentary, The Black Church, This Is Our Story, This Is Our Song by Henry Louis Gates Jr. Today, we have a wonderful panel with us. We have Bishop Courtney McBath, who is the senior pastor of Calvary Revival Church in Norfolk. We have Pastor pastor, Dr. Melvin Mariner, who is the senior pastor of Grove Church in Portsmouth, Virginia. And we also have the wonderful Barbara Ham Lee, who is the host of Another View and our co-host for this particular segment of the Talkback. You know, we talk about how important the church is, right? And we talk about social issues. Do you feel that there are some that are wanting to change the direction of the church? Because the church itself is built on Scripture. It's built on the righteousness, salvation, holiness, and being with God to go from the temporal to the eternal. Do you think there's a push in what we call the world to influence the church as opposed to the church influencing the world?
Who are you going to?
Go first.
Oh, whoever wants to take it. Bishop Macbeth.
All right. So if that is true, Dr. Claville, then it has always been true. The world has always wanted to exert influence on the church to make it like itself. That's why the scripture says, love not the world, the things that are in the world, and then it describes what the world is about. So the church's great, and the black church is so evident of this, the church's great challenge is to rise and be different from the world and direct and influence the world. So not only in spiritual things, but in economic things and issues of justice. There should, as Dr. King taught us, there should be righteousness should run down like waters, and it should start from the church, and justice should run down like a mighty stream. So there's a call on us to exercise the influence of justice and righteousness upon the world. The world won't necessarily like us for that, nor will they always embrace that, but yet it becomes a part of why we were created and why that documentary showed our influence, because we did it even in the face of challenge and in the face of struggle.
Absolutely. Dr. Mariner.
We have seen the church divided in many areas, from the National Baptist to the Progressive Baptist. And so as we look at, and I enjoyed Bishop Macbeth's comments, as I always do, I find that it's important as we look at it and engage in this conversation, that the word for me is the strength of my life. And it has been for the church as well. We stood on the liberating gospel that if God delivered Israel, he will deliver, Black Americans. And so we believe in that. And so the word says, be not conformed to this world, which means for me is to examine what's happening, but not allow the world to change the foundation of my belief system. It can challenge my belief system. It can ask for practical applications of my belief system. But I think that we have to make sure that we don't acclimate to the culture, because the culture is forever changing. And as a biblicist, I have to stand and not allow the world to change me, but perhaps change my methods to reach them. But I can't change the word. And so we got to make sure that we change methods, but we don't change scripture to accommodate people. Love is essential, but that doesn't mean that I have to accommodate everything that goes on in life. So again, renewing your mind, being true to the text, while God still allows us to evolve in the text.
Absolutely. Now, look, I don't know if you came to preach a message today, but he just quoted Romans chapter 12, verse 1 through 2, just in case you want to go back and take a look at it for those that are listening.
I want to say amen.
Well, but along that line, Dr. Mariner, in the documentary, they talk hip-hop artists are today's street preachers. And I wonder if the two of you agree or disagree with that statement.
I would agree. I would agree to some extent. I think that what the black church did was expose people. Everything launched out of the black church, the R&B, the gospels. Everything was launched out of the rhythm of our music and our heartbeat, and exercising a level of freedom that slave masters didn't allow us to have. And so I'm open to, again, different methods and to different genres. I'm more concerned with the content. I'm more concerned with where does that message send us, not so much as the rhythm of the beat and the stamping of my hand, but at the end of the day, are those words edifying? Are they true? And at what point do they bring change or provoke change? So I'm definitely okay. I remember when Kirk Franklin came out, the church went crazy. But I'm saying that he can reach a generation that I could not reach. And so we need a multiplicity of gifted people who want to use their gifts in a way that exposes God to the world. God cannot be placed in a capsule. He is amazing, and every aspect and attribute must be displayed.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Bishop McBath.
Well, I think the idea that rap artists are the street preachers of today, the word preach means to proclaim, and the question then becomes, what are you proclaiming? Now, if the rap artist is proclaiming something that, to me, puts women down and does not lift up our sisters, or in any way perpetrates things that we know are not good for our community, then I would say yes, preachers. But what is your message? I think the medium of rap, the medium of the current genre of music, can very much be the street preacher for today. As Dr. Mariner has so aptly said, the methods that we have to change in order to reach people. However, as Dr. Mariner also said, our message must be consistent with Scripture. So, yes, I do believe there's a place for new street preachers, and who will look different, dress different, sound different than how we sound. Thank God for that. But I will always encourage them to make sure your message lifts people up and doesn't bring them down.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, Barbara, I want to piggyback on that question before we head to our commercial break about the impact of the Black church in our music on society. Now, we talked about, hip hop artists, but what comes to mind is that as they were showing all of the musical artists that had success in R&B and in the world, the Aretha Franklins, the Whitney Houstons, even the MC Hammers, the Sam Cookes, the John Legends, all of them got their start in the church. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing to see how our music has influenced all and created really all other forms of music. I mean, I go back to Ray Charles and so forth. Dr. Mariner, from your experience, how profound is our influence, our church music influence on the world?
In a major way. I don't think that we can ever reduce what the impact of our music has caused on the world. I mean, the world. I'm glad you said the world, not just Black America, but the world.
Exactly. Absolutely.
The world is enjoying the benefits of us understanding the strength of our words and our melody.
Well, that does it for us. This is our Stay in the Water end of the year show, and we hope you enjoyed some of the interviews that we thought were some of the best that we did. Now, it definitely wasn't all of them, but we believe that we pulled a few that you enjoyed, that we enjoyed, and that were very informative. But listen up. We're not going to stop here, because we're coming right back on next Sunday, where we bring movers, shakers, and policymakers to you to discuss issues important to the community as we kick off our Happy New Year show in 2022. And we're excited to be able to do that. And I'm telling you, I'm truly excited for this upcoming year. We're going to look at the new landscape of the Commonwealth, the great things that are happening in the Commonwealth and on the campus of Norfolk State University, in our phenomenal city of Norfolk, and across the Hampton Roads region. So continue to tune in, continue to press that dial, and continue to stay locked into what we're doing here on State of Water, because without you, there would be no us. Again, I'd like to thank our producer, Marvin Folks, for being here and for all that he does with us. We wish all of you, hopefully you had a phenomenal Christmas, and we wish all of you a blessed and happy New Year going into 2022. God bless. Be well. See you next week.